Hello, my name is Lucas and I work in the Research and Development Department of Talent Data Labs. At TDL, we use data science as well as a scientific approach to improve talent management practices. Today, in this webinar, we will see how our tools can be used to improve performance within your organization. First of all, we will give a quick overview of our products, and then we will be digging deeper into one of those, the personality assessment tool. Finally, we will go through a real-life example in order to show how the tool can be helpful in a real and practical case. The assessment tools that we have at TDL are the personality assessment tool, the logical reasoning test, and the cultural fit assessment tool. As I said, today we will be focusing on the personality assessment tool. Specifically, we will look into the big 5 personality traits and their sub-factors. These traits have been used to measure and develop a better understanding of individual differences in personality since the late 20th century, and they constitute the standard framework for this type of operation. These traits are emotional stability, agreeableness, conscientiousness, extraversion, and openness to experience. Let's now see them one by one. Emotional stabilities, it refers to the tendency to feel negative emotions such as anxiety or stress or mood swings. Moving forward, we find agreeableness. Agreeableness is about being willing to create a positive social environment around us. So agreeable people, they will tend to be well-liked and well-respected among their colleagues. And on the other hand of the spectrum, we find those who have a low score on agreeableness, and they will tend to be more self-centered and self-focused. The next trait that we look into is conscientiousness. Conscientiousness refers to how much an individual is self-disciplined and is reliable, and it is associated with the capacity of getting the job done. On the other hand, people with a high score on conscientiousness, they can be not that flexible and not that spontaneous as well. Moving forward, we find extraversion. Everybody has an idea of what extrovert people are about, and basically they tend to like social interaction, like being around new people, meeting new people, while on the other hand, introvert people, they just need more time for themselves. Now, the last of our traits is openness to experience, which is associated with curiosity and creativity and sort of the artistic side of an individual. So people who score high on openness to experience, they will be more creative, but science and research shows they will also be more likely to engage in risky behavior. So one important thing to keep in mind about personality traits is that the higher the score, the better is not really true here. So if we think, for example, of agreeableness, which seems like a really good thing to have as a personality trait, then we might note that somebody who has a super high score on agreeableness, he can appear submissive and unable to have his own or her own needs respected, as they're constantly trying to listen to other people. So each position in each specific organization, it requires a specific mix of personality traits, and finding this perfect mix is exactly what we do at TDL. At TDL, we assess personality traits starting from responses to a standardized set of questions. The answer to each and every question in the set influences the score of candidates in the big 5 traits. This type of test is a standardized test based on the work of Kilty, DeYoung, and Peterson from the University of Toronto. At the end of the test-taking and assessment-taking procedure, a report is automatically created. In this report, it is possible to observe individual personality scores, so the scores in the 5 big personality traits, as well as 2 sub-scores for each of the big 5 personality traits. So we can see an example of such a report here, and we can see at top of the report the overall scores in the big 5 personality traits, and then scrolling down, we can compare the big 5 personality trait scores of an individual with those of another individual, or maybe a group of individuals. And finally, we can also see all of the sub-scores in the exactly the 10 sub-factors of the big 5 personality traits. So let's look at a real life case, in order to get an impression of how this might work and be helpful to an organization in real life. So the case will be about a CRM company which was a client of ours, and it had a really big sales team in which most of the individuals were not performing in an optimal way. So we were called in and we were asked for our advice. So we had their whole sales team taking our assessment, our personality assessment, and then we started looking at differences in personality between the top performers and the rest of the team. As you can see from this graph, top performers had substantially higher scores in three sub-factors: optimism, assertiveness, and politeness. So after a first and superficial impression, we might conclude that then the solution to the problem is simply to hire people who are polite, optimistic, and assertive. But actually drawing insights from data is not that simple, as the effect of personality traits on performance are not linear. In our case, for example, we have seen how politeness is an important factor, but it does not immediately follow that an employee who is twice as polite as somebody else is going to perform 2 times better. So this is the so-called problem of multidimensionality of data, and by using AI and data science, we can solve this issue and we can find the perfect mix of personality traits for a specific team. This, of course, will allow our clients to save time and increase productivity. And we can see here an example of the perfect mix of personality traits for this specific team. So we can see that here the perfect employee was more than twice as optimistic and assertive than the average candidate, but only slightly more polite. In other words, what this does seem to suggest is that politeness helps performance only up until a certain point, while optimism and assertiveness keep having a positive effect on performance also at higher scores. In other words, data suggests that being really optimistic and assertive makes you a great salesman, while a certain amount of politeness is required as well, but maybe being too polite can be counterproductive. So, to wrap up what we have seen in this case, we have seen how personality assessment helped to save screening time in the hiring process, reduce the number of bad hires, and increase performance of the new team by 15% in the following years. So this is all for today. I hope you have found this useful, and stay in touch because the next episode of our series of webinar will be released pretty soon.